Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the June the 9th meeting of the El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors to order. Roll call, please.
Directors Penn, Mansfield, Dwyer, Anzini, and Day present. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk of the Board Sullivan present.
Thank you. Please remove your hats and stand and join me in the pledge. Ready, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Thank you, Director Day. Any board discussion? Okay. Any public comment on the adoption of the agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda. Moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Right, moving to communications, general managers, employee recognition.
Good morning.
Anybody to brag about?
Well, all of them are worthy of being bragged about, but specifically, we received a call from Rhonda Santilli, EID customer, expressing appreciation for service provided by Garrett Maytak, construction maintenance worker in the drinking water division. And over the weekend, Garrett responded to our property, and our customer said he was awesome, did a great job. So again, excellent service is what we like to provide, and hearing that from our customers, always good to see.
Thank you very much.
End of the report.
And thanks to him for representing us so well. Okay, we'll now open to public comment for items that are not on the agenda for today. So if there's any public comment, please.
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to make a comment.
Okay, thank you. And now back by popular demand, the general manager and communication.
Just briefly, I was attending the Aqua meetings down in Monterey, and there was 3 that was very interesting to attend. One was a resiliency meeting that Region 3 held. We're doing a lot of the same stuff. A long-term financial planning seminar I attended, and then again, our Region 3 meeting was very well attended. Concludes the report.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you have anything, as clerk of the board, do you have anything to report?
None today, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, fellow board members, yes, Director Anzini.
Yes, I also attended the Aqua conference, and I find their workshops very beneficial, particularly watched and listened to the resiliency report, Region 3, but also watched I didn't participate, but I observed the legislative session. And I find it beneficial that Aqua does such a good job in helping our water agencies. I will also report that this Thursday in Tuolumne, there's going to be a Mountain County Water Resources Agency meeting, and I will be Zooming in because I find driving down there, attending a reception, and going to staying the night is a little overwhelming. But as an officer, as treasurer, I will be reporting in on Friday.
Thank you very much. Any other board member?
Sure.
Director Penn.
So like Jim and Lori, I also attended the Aqua Conference, also attended the Regional Water Authority meeting the week before, and then I also sat in the Aqua Joint Powers Insurance Authority for 2 days before the Aqua Conference. And as a new board member, it was just very good to bring me up to speed on a lot of the issues, meet a lot of the people, so it was time well spent.
Good. Thank you. Any other board comment? Okay, thank you all very much. Next, we'll approve, or potentially approve the consent calendar.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. Any board comment on the consent calendar? Any public comment on the consent calendar?
If members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's consent calendar, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2. President Dwyer does not appear. Any members of the public are wishing to speak on the the adoption of today's consent calendar, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Penn. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously. And just as a reminder, President Dwyer, you wanted to move action item number 11 after the approval of today's consent calendar.
Thank you. Yes, I do, so.
While you're doing that, I just want to say it's official now, so welcome aboard.
Well, it'll be official once we
Oh, you have to
approve
sign it?
action item 11.
Yes.
Well, I felt like it was, we
So we
approved
moved-
it. Oh, that's the water agency, never mind.
Yeah, we moved item 11 up. So I will entertain a motion to approve an employment agreement with Paravani Vandier as general manager, and we'll execute.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you very much.
And I will second it.
Thank you very much. Any other board comments? Any public comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 11, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer does not appear. There are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 11, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Great. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Okay, well, with that, I'd like to welcome Paravani to the district. We did a nationwide competitive search, had 99 or so candidates apply for this position. We did careful screening and selected Paravani. She has a strong background in water utilities, a science background in chemistry, and leadership skills that she has demonstrated in her term at the Sacramento Water Agency, or water utility. So we're confident that she brings to us the right experience, vision, and leadership to guide EID into the future, into the next 100 years. Jim did the first 100 years. So, thank you. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. Please join me in welcoming Paravani to the. And one day I'll learn how to pronounce your name properly. Pretty close? Okay, good. All right, we'll move to
Public
eight.
hearing item number
Public
8.
hearing, item number 8 on our water quality issues.
And we'll open the hearing at 9:11 a.m.
We're ready? All right.
Eh,
Good morning, Board. My name is Ryan Rothwell. I'm the Environmental Compliance Analyst here at the district. I'm going to go present today the 2025 Triannual Public Health Goal Report for drinking water in the main water system. Some previous board action on June 27th, 2022, the board adopted the 2022 Triannual Public Health Goal Report. This is a PHG report. Remember that acronym? I don't want to keep saying it. Lots of acronyms up in here for regulatory items. So we'll get through that. So, summary of the issue. We have a California Health and Safety Code that requires a PHG report every 3 years if results exceed certain defined goals. Part of that public health goal report is this public hearing. We have to present that and have the board approve this report. 2025 reporting triggering, we had out of approximately 4,600 samples for total coliform, we had 4 samples test positive. Now, regulations require us to do resampling at defined locations. In all instances, resampling reported negative results. So water quality meets all state and federal drinking water standards set to protect public health.
Can I ask, what are the chances on getting a false positive on the test?
That's a great question. We're going to get into that
Okay.
in this presentation, so thank you. So a little background on drinking water sampling at the district. We collect various samples across the district to ensure safe water is delivered to the customers. That's our primary goal. The enforcement on that, what does the state make us do? Those are the maximum contaminant levels, MCL. These are based on analytical detection capability, treatment technology, and costs and benefits. So again, these are the enforceable levels, maximum contaminant levels. All results for our sampling go into our annual water quality reports, also known as the consumer confidence reports. Whether or not those results exceed the MCL, we do have public-facing records on that. So you can find those online. What's in a PHG report? Or actually, let's start with what is a PHG? The public health goals are established by the California Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment, also Cal EPA, you can refer them to. Now, the federal EPA sets their own maximum contaminant level goals, MCLGs. Now, remember that G, it's not the MCL, MCLG goal. Lots of acronyms, like I say. PHGs and MCLGs are often set at very low levels. They're contaminant levels set below any expected known health risk, and they may be based on theoretical risk assessments, multiple assumptions, and mathematical extrapolations. Basically, they might not even be able to be measured in the lab at those such low levels. So for that reason, PHGs and MCLGs are non-enforceable. So the elements of a PHG report include addressing any contaminants that have an existing MCL and were detected at levels that exceed a PHG, or if there's no PHG, the MCLG. We need to define whether the risk for that contaminant is acute or chronic. We need to discuss the numerical public health risk assessment. This is the analyzing data to see communicate the likelihood of a harmful health effect from that contaminant. We need to discuss best treatment technology available to reduce that contaminant and estimate the cost to install any additional treatment if appropriate and feasible. The 2025 PHG report analyzed data between 2022 and 2024. Over 100 constituents monitored at various frequencies, and only 4 instances we had a reportable exceedance of a PHG or MCLG. And as previously mentioned, that would be total coliform bacteria. So what is total coliform? It's the broad spectrum of bacteria that could be found in drinking water or even in the environment for that matter. They're easy to monitor and analyze. They're called a surrogate indicator, meaning they're not generally considered harmful in themselves, but could lead to the potential of waterborne pathogens, which could cause disease. There's no specific numerical health risk for these items, meaning there's no acceptable level of bacteria, and that'll come into play here shortly. More on total coliform. So the district in the main water system samples 30 predefined sites on a weekly basis. That equates to around 4,600 samples over the last 3 years. In 2022, one occasion, 23, 2 occasions, and September 2024, April, October, November, and September at different years. We had exceedances. Now, a positive result, we don't want a positive. That means there's bacteria growing on the test. So if we look at 4 out of 4,600 samples, that's less than 0.1 positive results. That's great results. I commend our samplers who are highly trained, following established procedures, standard operating procedures, and they do their best to make sure there's no false positive, to Director Dwyer's comment. Now, it's impossible to have a false positive. If we get growth, there's growth. Now, the source of that is up for debate. That could be from the drinking water itself, or it could be environmental conditions during sampling, transportation, lab handling. Again, it's very prevalent in nature, and it's easy to get a positive result, and that does happen from time to time. So all initial samples tested positive for total coliform in these 4 instances, but all repeat samples to isolate the problem. We have to go out to an upstream site, a downstream site, and the same site to sample again. This is in the regulations to define, do you really have a problem? All of those results were negative, so there was no follow-up action necessary. So to summarize, total coliform bacteria exceeded an MCLG because the MCLG for total coliform is 0%. There's no acceptable level of bacteria that is okay in water, therefore it's set at 0. So again, we have results of 0.1%, actually less than that, which is higher than 0. So here we are at this public health goal report for that reason. So how do we treat for total coliform or bacteria in that matter? We can remove it with filtration, which is a primary treatment technology to physically remove it. And then we also chlorinate the water, keeping a residual level in the system to prevent any bacterial growth once the water leaves the treatment plant. So this inactivates the pathogens. We also have an effective cross-connection control program. For those unfamiliar, this reduces the potential of an interconnection between a potable and non-potable source, safe and non-safe. We maintain a positive pressure in the distribution system. This reduces the occurrence of back siphonage, water flowing back into our system. And like we mentioned, we perform weekly monitoring for these items and have very, very positive, in this case, positive good results, not positive bad. So happy with our system. So in conclusion, we had one constituent trigger the requirement for the public health goal report. The district implements all best available technologies for coliform bacteria as defined in Title 22 of the California Code of Regulations. The water quality, again, meets all state and federal drinking water standards set to protect public health. The PHG report is now ready for board consideration or any public comment. Our options today are option 1, adopt the 2025 triannual public health goal report for drinking water in the main water system. Option 2, and we're gonna skip that? Okay, I recommend option 1. Here for questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
Any questions from the board?
Of course I do. Sorry about whatever that was. A couple questions regarding when you use the word constituent. Does that mean the water sample or a actual ratepayer?
I don't work with ratepayers directly. I work with water. So no, that's a fair question. We're talking about a constituent in the water. So when I say
Yes.
constituent, because if we have calcium in the water, if we have
Okay.
alkalinity, that's not necessarily a contaminant. It's just part of what makes up the water. So I use the word constituent rather than contaminant. A bacteria is a contaminant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Move on.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. I did have a question. I remember Dan Corcoran gave us a presentation about the results of the fires and the potential contamination of our water through the flumes and through the runoff. And the higher levels of carbon promote the growth. Is that related to this at all?
So that's a great question. We have Bill Pedersen, our drinking operations manager here, who could speak more to the growth. What I can say for carbon, that comes in more of a play when we have disinfection byproducts. Those carbons interact with our chlorine to produce those disinfection byproducts.
Okay,
Are you aware, Bill? You can speak to the carbon affecting bacterial growth. I don't believe so.
Good morning, Board. Bill Pedersen, Drinking Water Operations Manager. So with the fires, we do have influx of runoff, and that can bring more organisms, coliform.
Organics,
Yeah,
yeah.
organics, a bunch of different constituents into the water, or contaminants also.
Not
Our treatment plants we have a great monitoring program. We monitor our source water, and we monitor every aspect of the treatment. And so we remove all of those bacteria or pathogens, coliforms, out of the water before entering the distribution system. So this public health goal is specifically to the finished water product from our treatment plants, not the source water.
Not the source water.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you very much for
Okay.
clearing that up.
All right, thank you.
And, you know, while our goal is 100% quality water, and I think we, through the sampling and our treatment operators, we do a really, really good job. 4 samples out of 5,000-ish. That's a pretty small percentage, and there was no repeat, so that gives me a great level of confidence in the system and the operators. So we have a first and a second. Any more board comments? Is there any public comment on this public hearing item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on public hearing item number 8, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on public hearing item number 8, option 1, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously. President Dwyer, if you don't mind terribly, staff has asked that we move up action item number 12, the water farm agreement, to be heard now as opposed to later. We have somebody in the audience that we would like to.
Sure. With the approval of the board, would anybody object to making that change? No? Okay.
Thanks very much, Jen. Good morning, Board. Brian Paulson, General Counsel with the district. Thank you very much for taking this out of order. I would like to recognize, I'm going to be giving a presentation today on the water form agreement and a proposed cost-sharing agreement. Before we jump into that, I'd like to recognize that we have with us today the Executive Director of the Water Forum, Ashley Casey. And because Ashley was here, and I was hoping that she wouldn't have to suffer through the pension obligation bond presentation.
More importantly, suffer through Jim's performance report.
Yes, that too. But I also want to recognize that both Ashley and our new General Manager, Pravani Bandiar, have a lot of experience with the Sacramento Water Forum. I have the least experience of the three of us, so I'll do my best not to embarrass myself while I'm giving this presentation. And if I get something wrong, I'd hope that one or both of you would call me out. So let's get started. The purpose of today's presentation is to request that the board authorize a funding cost share agreement to fund certain costs associated with the ongoing work of the Water Forum. As you can see from this slide, there have been many previous board actions that relate to the Water Forum. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I will just call out that the most recent action item was in 2023 when the board authorized the cost share agreement that we're continuing to seek funding for today. So to summarize here, the members of the Water Forum, and I'll describe who they are further in the presentation, are negotiating a successor agreement. The agreement, the Water Forum agreement, is the foundational document that forms the Water Forum. And through their negotiations, there is a need for continued funding to meet the costs associated with facilitation and certain technical work that's being done as a part of that process. Next slide. So today's presentation will focus on the Water Forum 2050, or the agreement that we're negotiating and why it matters, the agreement's key program areas, and how it protects both water supplies in the Lower American River, the American River watershed, I should say, and the river itself. Just a little bit of background. You know that I couldn't give a presentation without some sort of citation of a prior case law decision. So just to sort of provide a little bit of context here, in 1958, the State Water Resources Control Board issued a decision known as Decision 893. That decision granted certain water rights applications, namely to the United States Bureau of Reclamation, but it also took action on a number of other pending applications that involved such a number of entities, including the City of Sacramento and its water rights. As a result of that decision, later in 1970, the East Bay Municipal Utility District was able to contract with the Bureau of Reclamation to receive a substantial amount of water that was going to be stored in Folsom Reservoir to the tune of like 125,000 acre-feet or something along those lines. It was a lot of water. Not surprisingly, it was controversial at the time and resulted in almost 2 decades of litigation, ultimately being decided by a very well-known case in 1990 known as the Environmental Defense Fund versus East Bay Municipal Utility District, East Bay MUD. The decision has become known in the water law community as the Hodge decision, and it's literally in every textbook, water law textbook, that's taught to aspiring water lawyers. The decision was unique because it resolved the conflict between the needs of East Bay MUD and its water supply and the needs of the Lower American River to make sure that there was sufficient water left in the river to provide for critical habitat associated with the aquatic species in the river. The decision literally set flows that had to be met in order for East Bay MUD to be able to take water, and others, including the City of Sacramento. So very important decision, and it effectively or temporarily resolved what had been many years, several decades, as a matter of fact, of conflict regarding water for, water supply versus water for the river itself. Next slide, please. Consequently, in the early to mid-90s, a number of the entities that were involved in the dispute decided that there had to be a better way to work together to try and meet the needs both of, to balance the needs of water supply and also protect the resources in the Lower American River. And that is why in 2000, after many years of negotiating, a number of entities formed what is now known as the Sacramento Water Forum, or in short, the Water Forum. Next slide. There are 40 agencies involved and members of the Water Forum. EID was one of the original signatories in 2000 to the agreement. And the agreement is organized around two goals, and I've said them repeatedly. They are to protect the water supplies of the Lower American River and to protect the in-stream resources of the river itself. The agreement has effectively established peace on the river, if you will, for the last 25 years, which is a major accomplishment given the prior decades of litigation and conflict between water supply and the environment. Next slide, please. The impact of the water forum has been tremendous. I won't go through every detail here, but as you can see, there's been a lot of work done on developing science related to in-stream beneficial uses and the needs of, the critical habitat needs for protected species such as the winter-run Chinook salmon. I will say, beyond just the sort of quantifiable achievements of the water forum, one of the perhaps more important, though harder to quantify benefits is establishing a culture of trust between the participants. The forum is organized into caucuses, a water agency caucus, a business caucus, a public agency caucus, and an environmental caucus. And then together they form a plenary, and they meet once every other month or so. I'm looking at Ashley-ish. Each of the caucuses meet monthly, and then the plenary comes together less frequent, but to discuss, the needs of the water forum, the needs of the river, the needs of the agencies, and so forth. Next slide. Why are we renegotiating the agreement or negotiating a new one? The most obvious answer is that under its original terms, the water forum agreement expires in 2030. So there was always it always envisioned, a next phase. We began negotiating several years ago, early, because, climate change, extreme weather, and drought, and a number of other, regulatory factors have prompted the parties to get together to start to talk about what does the next phase of the water forum look like. Next slide, please. For EID in particular, this was important because while we were an original signatory to the water forum agreement in 2000, importantly, EID never negotiated a certain piece of the agreement, what has become known as the purveyor-specific agreement. These are the specific sort of sub-agreements that kind of attach to the main agreement that say, we, the agency, will commit to X, Y, and Z in return for A, B, and C. There are reasons why EID never took that next step, and they probably go beyond the scope of our meeting today, but largely it was because there was a lot of conflict within the county associated with the general plan, land use development, and so forth. We just couldn't get to a point where we were able to effectively accomplish that task. That is our goal for this time around, is to be able to participate more meaningfully in the regional water forum, so that we have a seat at the table, we have a place where we can engage with the rest of the caucuses in a meaningful way to establish regional cooperation. Next slide, please. So, what is the water forum consist of? Just high level here. The water forum agreement addresses habitat enhancements and management in the Lower American River. It addresses the flow standards required to meet certain aspects of the river's needs. There's a conjunctive use element. There's a regional collaboration element where water agencies agree to help one another with their regional water supply issues and so forth. At times, the water forum engages in advocacy, though that is not a main feature of its work. So move to the next slide. We'll talk about the provisions. These are just the co-equal goals of the water forum to provide a reliable and safe water supply for the region and to preserve the fishery, wildlife, recreational, and aesthetic values of the Lower American River. And though the focus is on the Lower American River below Folsom, below Nimbus Dam, EID is not the only upstream entity that participates. Placer County Water Agency, and to a lesser extent, some of the smaller agencies also engage in the water forum. But the water forum looks upstream of the reservoir as much as it is focused on the Lower American Reservoir for obvious reasons. That's where the water comes from. Next slide, please. This is just a visual of what the agreement under negotiation currently looks like in terms of the various topics that it addresses and how they're addressed. The flow and operations is one. You have river corridor health as its own part of the agreement, regional water supply sustainability, and you can see the others up on the screen. The purpose of today's agreement is to seek the board's authorization to continue to fund this. And just to briefly describe, of all the agencies contributing funding, one of the important things that we did over the course of the last year, and huge kudos to Ashley Casey for her really hard work to make this happen, was to renegotiate the sort of funding allocation. How do the entities engaged in water forum contribute to bearing their costs? And historically, the funding was largely based on the number of connections or customer connections. In many ways, that didn't really account for a lot of factors, such as, for example, agencies that rely primarily on groundwater versus surface water from the Lower American River. Agencies like EID that have multiple surface water sources, some from the American River, some from the Cosumnes River. And so through some very painstaking negotiations, we were able to develop a cost-sharing methodology that tries to account for all of those things. You can see here that connection counts are still a factor because we're trying to assess, the size of the agency that's impacting these resources. Groundwater production and then American River diversions are other factors as well. With that methodology in place, next slide, please. This is what it looks like in terms of breaking out the costs to fund the successor effort for the water forum. EID at the very top with a contribution of roughly 67,000, and then you can see what the other agencies' contributions look like just for a reference. Next slide. And then to fund the habitat management element, same methodology, and our costs are on the first line, 61,000, with the other agencies just there for your reference. So the request today is to fund the cost-sharing agreement to the tune of $128,451. And this is a slide that shows the participating funding entities, and actually all of the entities that are participating in the agreement. And with that, the options are before you, and I would recommend option one.
Approve an annual funding agreement with the Sacramento Water Forum and authorize payments of $66,634 for the Water Forum successor effort, cost sharing, and $61,817 for the habitat management element cost sharing, for a total funding request of $128,451. And as Brian Polson stated, staff is recommending option one.
Okay. Entertain a motion.
I'll move option one.
Thank you, Director Day.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Mansfield. I've got a couple of questions.
Ashley Casey would be glad to answer them.
How many permanent staff are there for the?
It's probably easier for her to come here.
For the water forum?
Good morning.
Good
Nice to
morning.
see
Thank you
all.
for joining
having
us.
me, and very good presentation. Yes, question.
Yes. How many permanent staff do you have for the water forum?
We have 4 permanent staff right now with 1 open position.
Okay, and how much of the work or how much of the budget is split between internal staff and contractor support?
Yeah, it's about 55%, I would say, are more fixed cost associated with overhead, with the office space, IT, city services, and employee benefits and salaries. And then 45 or so are more consulting costs and variable costs within the years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other board questions or comments? Director Day, you look like you were reaching. Come on.
No, I don't really know. It's not really a question. I'm just pondering, because back when the El Dorado County Water Agency was known as EDWAPA, there was a lot of talk about how the water forum could help facilitate their water application. And I'm just curious, did any of that go anywhere? Since I have you here.
I can try, you might have more of the historical context than I do on that. Do you want to go, or do you want me to go first? Okay.
Who's
I-
got
and just so-
hot potato?
Just so I make sure I know we're talking about the same thing. Right now, there is an EIR on the street from El Dorado Water Agency. We're talking about the same application?
Yeah.
Yes. So they are a member of the Water Forum still. El Dorado Water Agency is still a member of the Water Forum. They have used the Water Forum as a venue to share information and have discussions with other Water Forum members on that process. So I'd say we're still connected to it, but we are, there's lots of diversity within the membership in terms of their perspectives on that proposal and that project. So we serve as a venue for coordination and hopefully relationship building, but that's where we are right now.
Okay, thank you.
Great answer. I love that answer.
Very good. Stepped on.
Okay, any other board comments? Any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 12, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 12. Option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Mansfield. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you very much for attending and sharing your knowledge. Okay, we'll move backwards to information item number 9, General Manager, Key Performance Indicators.
Good morning. Hopefully it's not as bad as the Bob Reeb legislative report.
He's cleaned that up a little bit.
He's sped it up.
Yeah.
I liked providing the board with information about our key performance indicators because it paints a picture of how well the district's operating as a whole, and it will show some successes and some challenges that we'll have. Next slide, please. I'd just like to remind folks of our guiding principles. We continue to try and promote that and keep that in perspective in everything we do. Next slide. Based on that, our safety performance is okay. Our results in both lost time and IRMAs, we would hope that would be 0, but unfortunately we've had a few lost times and a few IRMAs. And the avoidable auto accidents have increased. So when we see that, we start having special infamous programs, to try and address those and keep those accidents much lower than they are now. Next slide. We also, for safety, we look at our public health and safety standards, and I'm pleased to report for the second year, no violations. And you heard the report on the water system this morning. Next slide is respect for the individual, and this is really targeted internally. District employee survey, we do that about every 2 years. This one's scheduled for the second quarter. We probably won't make it the second quarter, but it'll be very soon we do this. But if you look back in 22, 86% agree or are very satisfied, and the question is, my work gives me a feeling of accomplishment. So when you have 86% of your employees agree or very satisfied with it, that's a good number. I'm hoping 25 is going to be the same. And the next one, we utilize the Labor Management Committee to really discuss areas of concern before they get not blown out of proportion, but before they become a major issue. And the question we ask our employees is the Labor Management Committee effective in clarifying or addressing the questions or concern? And 71% agree or strongly agree. So it's a very effective tool in addressing employees' concerns. Looking externally, we measure performance from our customers. You can see that the overall phone and field are pretty much the same, very high marks in 89%, 96 and 97. So that's really good numbers in overall customer satisfaction. The one thing that dropped, and probably not unexpectedly, is the reasonableness of water rates. We did implement an aggressive 12% rate increase to help fund some of our capital improvement programs. So you see a slight decline in that. We still continue to have a strong customer engagement and online bill pay customers. You can see that percentage is high. And also customers with email addresses. Again, as I share that number with other utilities in the area, it's just incredibly high number for customers to participate, giving us their emails for customer communications. And a lot of the compliments we get is because when we use that for outages and unexpected outages and things like that, we can immediately get that information out to our customers. And Jenny Downey and her staff and Karen and Jesse, when he was here, they do a great job in trying to communicate via email to our customers. Yeah.
I want to go back to slide number 6, when we talk about the reasonableness of water rates and wastewater rates. And I remember us seeing this before, and it's always in that area. Nobody likes to pay their water rates. However, I wonder if, and I'm suggesting this for the future, that if we uptake or we update our way of education to our ratepayers in a more educational form, would that help? And I'd like to see that more than we've had before. And you know, I've always mentioned that.
Anytime we can help share information with our customers, justifying or explaining the water rate situation or wastewater rate situation, I think that's a real positive, and we'll continue to do that. I think the numbers this year just resulted from the high percentage in rate increases. But yeah, I think anytime you can educate our customers on the reasons why, it's very effective. So we'll continue doing that.
Yeah, from the Aqua venture that we had in Monterey, of course, there are many booths, and I've seen this over time and time, that the education of our ratepayers needs to be more enhanced and stimulated in, as you mentioned on item number 7, the online feature. And quite frankly, I have seen other water agencies that do a much better job of informing their ratepayers. There are significant other water agencies that are doing a much better job. So
Well, let me be
that's
clear
just
on
my-
that. Yeah, we used to have 3 people in that department. We
Right.
downsized it to 2. We can certainly increase the efforts out there, and I'm sure Pravani will take a look at that as she comes on board. But with the rate increases we saw earlier in my tenure here and the downsizing that's taken place over the last 10, 15 years, we're only down to 2, and that's kind of a stretch, but we can certainly try and increase our effectiveness in that communication area.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would just, Lori, if you see in your discussions with people, if you see a good program, then try to get information and bring it back to us.
I do have.
Yeah,
I think, I can't remember if they're part of your, if you have the slides in here that compare our rates to the,
We do.
in your presentation here?
Yeah.
Okay, let's shelve.
Okay. And speaking of more outreach and engagement, this slide shows the visitors and subscribers and reach and impressions and all that stuff that social media shares. Now, if you ask me what all this means, I don't know. But it means a lot of people are looking at it. So I think that's good information. I think impressions on Nextdoor, you can see, we really started that effort much larger effort a year ago or 2 years ago, so that showed really positive results. So we'll continue this and see how we can increase that information sharing with our customers. Slide. Area that's still a concern for us is the number of unplanned water outages. You can see that we're below standard in all 4 areas. Outages unplanned for less than 4 hours, 4 to 12, and greater than 12. It's simply, you know, how much money can we spend on replacing old deteriorated pipe or service lines that we have out there. I mean, we had that outage in Cameron Park not too long ago. Good news is we were able to isolate our customers. Bill's not here. It only affected a couple, but it's just old plastic pipe that gets brittle and fails. So I think we just need to continue our efforts and funding for the capital replacement program. The good news on the wastewater side, I'm sorry. Again, number of water system leaks and breaks per 100 miles, way below aqua standards, or AWWA standards on the water system. I mean, we just have lots of old pipe out there. On the sewers, sanitary overflows, we're still doing a good job. The guys are maintaining the system, keeping them cleaned, which is a real good sign. So that's good news. Number of fire hydrants serviced. With the fires going on in the communities, we added this a couple years ago. We try and service our fire hydrants every 5 years, and you can see, you know, we're pretty much on schedule for that. And then finally, the service lines needed to be replaced. I know the board's desire is to have much more planned response than unplanned, but it's a function of the budget and how much is allocated for that replacement. This one we may take off depending on what the board wants to do. A year or two, some board members expressed concerns on are we reading all our meters, are they accurate? You can tell when you're at 99.997% accurate, there's not much room to improve. And that's a standard that we've met for many years. We just haven't posted it. I think we started either last year, or maybe in 23 actually, or maybe 22, reporting this number, but I don't think it's a strong indicator of performance. It's just a matter of fact. So that's something Pravani can look at for next time. Before we go to operating, well, we're at operating expenses. We didn't, no, keep it there. One of the things I didn't put a slide on, I probably should have, but I know the board's interested in how can we keep our operating expenses or capital expenses lower, and that's through grant programs. And just in a brief summary, and we've made several board presentations on this. You know, since 2014, we've secured over $35 million in grant funding, which is a significant amount of money. And we have pending applications for $3 million more, even after the cancellation of some of the federal programs. So we're very, very active in pursuing those grants. It's a little more challenging now, given the change in administration, but we'll continue to focus on that. Even since 2022, just internally, we had 10 grants totaling $22 million for projects as of emergency backup generators, water line replacements, and fuel reduction. So significant contribution to our budget compliance.
And Jim?
Yeah.
This morning I talked with Jen about having a presentation from our grant writer sometime in the future, just to give us the landscape and what's in the pipeline and things like that, because obviously the landscape is changing every day. So
Yeah.
hopefully in the next couple of meetings we'll get an updated presentation on that.
Okay. And believe it or not, we're still working with FEMA through our congressman on trying to get them to pay us money for the the fire from the Caldor fire, and that's been over 4 years ago. So we'll continue pursuing those funding efforts. But you can see as the operating expenses there, we're typically, let's see, where are we? I see Brian's head in the way. There we are. Slightly over budget in the fourth quarter, and as Sarah explained to me, this is an overage of non-cash recording of operational expenses for goods and services that were prepaid in 22 and 23. Right.
23, which is rolled over to be paid in 24.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Then the next slide is the capital expenditures. And as we've said, we'd like to be between 70 and 90% at the year end. We're a little lower than I expected, but 75, 76%. And the reason we put that goal between 70 and 90 is, I mean, I could be at 0 if you want me to, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because you just defer capital. So here you want to make sure you're spending the capital wisely to help improve our service reliability numbers. Next slide. And you can see our debt service coverage going up a little bit more. Again, this is unaudited. The audit will be presented to you in the July board meeting. But you can see we're meeting the annual ratios without FCCs. We're not at medium yet, but we're working toward that. And just a reminder, in our both of our bond ratings that we recently got, both Moody's and S&P reaffirmed our ratings from previous years. I'd like to report on our outstanding debt. You can see it's $439 million unaudited, and what you see over time is it will go up a little bit and then back down and then go back up, back down. So we try and manage that, and the number around 400 is what they call a strong rating by Moody's, that it's when you're in a utility business and you have a lot of assets to replace, that number is not really out of line. And then you can see our annual debt service payments. Oh, here's the number I was looking at. The debt to capitalization ratio of 50%. Moody's indicated it's slightly elevated because, again, we just issued a $70 million bond, but it's still within that range. And please note that our historical cost of depreciated assets is $1.3 billion. So there's a lot of assets out there to replace over time.
There's some things in accounting that really don't make sense. And depreciating our capital assets, the pipes in the ground, when the actual cost of replacement is going up rapidly, we way understate our plan.
Yep. No, and then, the rule of thumb is, you should be at least spending what your depreciation is in capital asset replacement. Okay, next slide. And this is unaudited results. One of the things that our rating agencies wanted to see is an increase in our days cash on hand, and it's increased to 300 days. Again, unaudited, and we'll have the final numbers when the audit's presented to you. Delinquencies, one of the things, believe it or not, the rating agencies like to see is, are you having significant defaults out there? Is there any one or two big customers defaulting? Are you at risk at those levels? And I got to tell you, customer services and the finance people do a great job in managing our customer bills and keeping the delinquency rate very, very low. These are just some trends over time now. I like these because they're big picture stuff. You can see the operating expenses per service connections has gone up, but that's kind of expected with the inflation we've had over the last 2 or 3 years. I'll get to the employees, services per employee in a minute. Overtime hours still very, reasonable, and legal expenses very, very reasonable. This is a slide I really like showing because it's very high level, probably 40,000 foot level is how many customers do you serve per employee? It's a big ratio that says, okay, are we being as efficient as possible? And if you look at EID, there's 331 services per employee, significantly higher than almost every other district out there. And I applaud our employees that, we're lean and mean and efficient, no, not mean, but we're lean and efficient out there in serving our customers. So I think it's also something the board should be proud of, that, we are lean and we are doing a good job in serving our customers, and those are just good numbers. Here's the water rate slide. Good news is we're about the median in both water and wastewater compared to other agencies. When I first got here, we're about a third of it. It was an indication that our rates weren't being kept up to a level to replace the assets that we needed to, but now we're at the median level. And the next slide, you'll see the comparisons. And the ones to the left are primarily high-density utilities that don't have the same miles of line that we have, versus on the right-hand side are the more spread-out areas that have many more miles of line per customer than other districts. So I'd just like to share that as a comparison. And the next slide is the wastewater side. One thing I wanted to point out on this one, especially with the customer going to be participating in the next board meeting, we're one of the few that have a commodity rate and a fixed charge. Most have a fixed charge, and we did that intentionally because the low water users, especially the elderly, they pay less on the commodity piece. But a lot of districts don't do that. So as we hear from the customer and we hear from our presentation coming up next board meeting, that's something to consider. We can certainly change that to a fixed rate, which I don't recommend, but you'll see that coming up soon.
Yeah, I think not only consideration for the low water user customers and their ability to affect their bill, we also did that for conservation purposes, to encourage the conservation.
Yeah, to that point, I think it's a lot of people now understand you need to turn your irrigation off, because in past decades, people would just set it and forget it, and we're wasting all that water in the wintertime. And because now it's more price sensitive, I think we are saving and conserving water, because people know, hey, during that 2-month billing period especially, you need to turn it off. And then usually that means they turn it off sooner and keep it off longer.
Yeah.
So I think it's a positive.
Next slide. Then looking forward for the next 5 years, this will be Pravani's charge going forward. You're welcome, Pravani. One of the things we've had on our list for quite some time is pursue the drought year water supply called the Fazio water. It's pending negotiations with the El Dorado Water Agency. Please remember, though, we need to finish the permit 2112, which is the next bullet down there, moving that water out of Folsom up to up the hill to Kybers and to the other treatment plants, so there's space to be able to use that Fazio water down in El Dorado Hills. But we'll be working on it. We've had just a brief discussion that that's something we're interested in doing, subject to the point of diversion change that Elizabeth's working on. Please note on the point of diversion, the draft environmental document should be out this month. All right, Elizabeth. And then submit the change petition to the state board in the fourth quarter of this year. So we're moving along, and I know it's taken a long, long time to get there, but like Brian said, anytime you deal with water rights and water diversions and all that, it just takes forever to get there. But the good news is the draft will be out in June, and hopefully the petition filed in fourth quarter of this year. Expand non-rate revenue through water transfers. Last one we did was 577 acre feet in 22. We're still working, believe it or not, with the Bureau of Reclamation on the water transfers, especially the conserved water transfer. They are very, 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 very difficult to work with. They're almost worse than FEMA. But we are pursuing that. We'll probably get our congressional representatives involved in trying to put pressure on the Bureau to do what they should be doing. Anyway, with the change in leadership over the last few years, we went from a regional manager that said, hey, let's get to yes, to a regional manager that says no, 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 no. So we'll continue working on that. Continuous succession planning. I haven't had a chance to sit down with Pravani to say, hey, here's our succession plans, but we'll be working on that over the next month or two. Good news is the next one, replace Hanson 7. It's pretty much done. A few little touches to be done with, and that's a huge project. It was about a $10 million project. And successfully implemented. So that's good news. Great job, Aaron and team.
I keep thinking it's the boy band that they're talking about.
Okay, next one would be complete improvements. Yeah. Oh, I got it. Some more goals is complete the Silver Lake Dam, Flume 46 and Sly Park Intertie. Silver Lake Dam is 60% in design completed, construction 27-28, and we'll just see how the regulatory process goes there. That will also impact when we go out to bond. I think we've told our regulators in 27, but my guess will be more like 28 or 29, but we'll just see what happens there. Flume 46 is a project or a flume that's 3,800 feet long. It's one of our most vulnerable flume sections in case of fire or something like that. I did ask Brian Mueller when he was here to do how could we get water flowing in case something happened there. We have that design as a emergency response for that flume. It'll be a big ticket item when we do a permanent fix, but if something happens there, we have identified alternative for an emergency response. And then lastly, the Sly Park Intertie design's complete, as you know. We're in construction and the project's moving along. These are two old ones. The customer service study was completed, rates implemented. What did I say? Oh, sorry. Yeah, cost of service study, and then the powerhouse interconnection with PG&E was completed as well. One thing I always like to bring up, and maybe as we talk about the pension obligation bond, this is something we'll address as well. We do have an unfunded liability on OPEB of about $38 million. One of the things we would have liked to have done over the years is get some of our non-rate revenue through water transfers, income to be paying that down over time. Just for example, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, We put $6 million in that fund to help pay down that liability, and now it's grown to 14 million. So one of the things I hope as the budget's prepared with Pravani, that we start putting some money toward that to keep that in a reasonable level as well. Implement a disposition strategy for our surplus properties. Pleased to report that at least one piece is done. The Hidden Lake to Friends of Hidden Lake transfer was done, so that's good news. Successfully negotiate the State Water Resource Control Board Phase 2 Water Quality Control Plan update regarding the voluntary agreements. It is a slow process. Brian and I participate in it. It is a slow process. It's trying to solve some of the water quality issues down in the Delta. In some areas, you think, oh man, we're getting close. In other areas, you may think there's other legal options that we may have to consider. Brian is going to schedule a closed session with the board to go through this and brief you in more detail. One of our goals too was update the water master plan and the FCC study. Both of those were done in 2024. We continue to explore opportunities to refinance or pay down debt to lower overall costs. Contrary to the report you received from the grand jury, the pension obligation bond was a successful transaction that provided a net present value savings of $10 million at the time of issuance, and we'll go more into that at the next information presentation. And we did a major bond issuance in last year. The next major bond issuance would be in 27, maybe 28, depending on some of the CIP stuff and how that is all phased in. But that's embedded in the cost of service study as well. Next slide. You just heard about the water forum agreement. Negotiations are underway. Brian's doing a good job on that. One thing we'd like to do over the next few years, we have an old Great Plains financial software. Aaron's going to be working with the new financial director and Sarah to select the software and vendor and bring that to the board for approval to improve that financial software. And then I added this just because this was part of the comments that both Moody's and the S&P gave to us. Improve our financial goals with the annual debt service greater than 2. We're at 1.85 now. Really like to see it closer to 2.3 or 2.5, but one step at a time. And then also days cash on hands greater than 250 days. We're at 300, so we're moving in the right direction. And that concludes the presentation on the key performance indicators, and just any questions from the board?
Question? Okay, I think, thank you. You're leaving the district in pretty darn good shape.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everything that you've done to help us accomplish our mission and our goals.
Thank you.
I think just a quick comment on the rates. Nobody likes paying their utility bills. But the fact that we're in the middle of the pack for both water and wastewater, I think is a very healthy thing. Because those, like you pointed out, that are on the left-hand side, that are lower than us, maybe are not doing all their capital improvements they might need to, and one day it'll catch up with them. And those that are on the other side are experiencing maybe that catch-up. They're doing things now that they should have done in the past.
Yeah, and a big density issue there, I think is the biggest thing, but yeah.
Right. Thanks. Yes, Director Enzini.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment. Thank you, Jim, for this report. I think that the average ratepayer does not understand the complexity and the huge amount of maintenance required in a very complex water agency as ours. Not on any of those water agencies compared to us, other than some mountain county water agency that would be of similar. We handle wastewater, we handle water, we're handling flumes, we're handling described problems of making sure certain agencies that we're following through with their rules and regulations. I think the complexity of EID is much higher than even my old pensioner East Bay Mud is. And they're much larger, of course. But I think the importance of making sure not only ratepayers, but our elected officials that represent us understand the complexities of what it takes to fund and keep the place operating. We have a great staff who does this, thanks to Jim's leadership. And I think that it's really important that we still have to move forward with the education of everybody, because the world is changing quite fast, and even our employees are going to have a difficulty catching up with it. But stand true and make sure that our water is still served to our ratepayers in a safe manner. And thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 9, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on information item number 9. No action, obviously, because it was an information item.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to information item number 10 about our pension obligation bonds.
Thank you very much. I'll start with, I am not a pension obligation bond expert or an actuarialist, but I believe this information will be beneficial to the board to understand, one, why we did it and kind of where we are today and what we see going forward. So with that, next slide. There is 4 board meetings that the board considered these pension obligation bonds. The most detailed one was February 28th of 22, where we showed the board, the benefits of the pension obligation bond, the risks. There was actually a case study that we had in the board package that addressed a lot of the concerns that were expressed by the grand jury, including the government GFOA concerns, and that was addressed in that case study analysis that we gave to the board on February 28th. And there's the other board meetings that we presented that to the board. Next slide. So today, the summary of the issue is provide an update on the pension obligation bond, actual versus projected cash flows, the comparison of the interest rates, kind of the updated outlook of the unfunded accrued liability, and just a brief response to the grand jury concerns. This is not the final, of course. We're going to bring that to the board, the next board meeting, but it addresses some of those concerns. We even had our financial advisor take a look at some of those concerns, and their comments are included in this. Next slide. So in the background, when we brought this to the board in December or in 2022, we were paying about 7% imputed interest on $70 million of debt, essentially, to CalPERS.
Jim, could we pause there on
Yeah.
a moment? The imputed interest, and but you don't see that term too often. So I know it means implied, assumed. Why would, first clarify, so we were in the hole to CalPERS, and they were charging us interest on that debt, is that
Yes.
correct?
7%.
Yeah, and then which was eating up any returns that they were generating.
Yes.
Okay. Why was the interest imputed versus just not knowing, or just knowing what they were charging?
I think that's what they were charging us.
Okay. I just wonder why we use the term imputed. Because it usually means you're estimating or assuming something you don't know.
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, there's-
related to the delay.
Yeah, because they forecast,
Jose, I think, can answer this question. Remember, Jim reminded you he's not a specialist.
Good morning, Board. Thank you. I'm also not an expert, but as far as the 7%, recall that CalPERS has an expected rate of return on an annual basis. And to Jen's earlier comment, the UAL is based on that expected rate of return. Sometimes CalPERS hits that, sometimes they go above, but sometimes they go below. And so it's always an estimate 2 years in arrears, based on my understanding.
But this isn't their estimated returns. This was interest they were charging on our underfunded debt, unfunded debt,
Correct.
right? Because we'll get to the projected returns in a moment in this presentation. I just want to highlight this because I think I had the question about imputed, but also I think it's important as we go through this to recognizing there was a significant cost because we were so far behind on our paying our obligation.
correct. And in fact, the UAL is just really your minimum unfunded liability payment. They recommend, and you'll see in my presentation, that you pay more than that, and we have not.
Which means we've saved money.
No, it means that we built up a $70 million debt.
Yeah,
Well,
we defer payment. I
we've
think.
deferred it, okay.
In the background, again, the pension obligation bonds allow us to replace high-cost UAL payments with lower-cost bond payments, and we'll get into that a little bit. And the goal is to reduce the long-term liability cost and generate savings through the lower interest rates. And here's just some definitions. I won't go through them unless the board asks me to do it, but the bottom bullet is to amortize our unfunded liability payments over a period of 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. We've selected to do that over a 20-year schedule, which essentially delays us paying the piper. And we continue to incur more debt because we've selected that schedule. Next slide. I think we've gone through that. One of the comments that we received from the grand jury is that we did not present the risks and potential savings. But even then, we did a case study. We had the financial advisors in attendance and available to respond to any questions. And quite frankly, I reviewed the video on that February board meeting. I got to tell you, you guys asked lots of good questions on dealing with that.
Yeah, I'll just concur because I was there, and I know Pat and I both had a lot of concerns because we understood there's upside to it. We understood, though, that there was risk.
Yeah.
It's not free. And I think we did discuss that quite a bit.
When you review the grand jury report, they list what they reviewed. They did not list that they reviewed the audio or the videos or the board presentation and the staff report on that in their report. But no, the board asked great questions. In fact, one of the recommendations was to set up a reserve account to take the savings and put in the reserve account to pay for any type of liability that comes up from changes to some of these assumptions. Next slide. So the initial projection in January, before we brought it to the board, we could have gotten a bond at 3.16%. And interest rates were changing quickly. And again, the initial present value savings was about $22 million. We did the final issuance. The final numbers were $10 million present value savings. and the higher interest rate is 4.7. That's true interest cost, meaning, all-in costs. And you think about it, and I asked the financial advisor, would we do this same pension obligation bond today, given the rates? And he said no, because the rates, that spread wasn't there. But back then, the spread was there, and it made a lot of sense. Next slide. This is just a cash flow of savings, the final report from Citigroup, just to show the numbers for the board. Next slide. And this was the restructuring strategy. So you'd see savings each year, or estimated savings each year going forward. Next slide. So the CalPERS returns versus the pension obligation bond. So our bond rate, true interest cost, is 4.7, and the CalPERS returns, I just shared the 24 one here, 9.3. So that's a good stock return or investment return on that. And if you look at the 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year average, you can see the returns are higher than our bond interest rate. So that spread is going to be continued ongoing net savings.
And I think, wouldn't it be relevant, I know we don't have a financial director right now, but what we should also factor in and include in this is that we were paying them interest.
Right.
So so yes, it's good. We want CalPERS returns to be above the 4.7%. So then we're benefiting, but we would potentially still benefit. Say the return was 5%, but we avoided paying the 7%.
Yeah, this is just the rate of return versus the pension obligation rate.
Right.
It doesn't compare the pension obligation bond rate with the debt we were paying at 7%.
Yeah.
So it's even better savings.
And that's something for maybe next year, because I'd like to see us look at this every year. Understanding the market's going to fluctuate, but I'd like to see us include that the value of avoiding paying that imputed interest.
One of the things you'll see in here, and every financial person I've talked to, looking at it a year-by-year basis is very, very difficult, because you really don't know the true savings until you achieve them at the end of all this, because of the market conditions. So that's why I put a lot of averages in here. Because one year you may lose money, but the next year you make money, so you need to look at the long term. But that's something
But maybe you
we
could
can look
maybe
at.
talk me into every other year, but I think it's important to track it, understanding it's going to fluctuate, but also because there will be board member turnover and staff turnover, and I think we need to keep it up front and center and be aware, and also to be able to measure, was that a good decision? And again, not panic because they're down for a couple, CalPERS returns are down for a couple of years, but that's why I think we also have to factor in the interest we avoided paying and factor that in as well. So anyway, I just think it's good to keep it up so the board is aware of it, new staff members are aware of it, so we continue to talk about it.
And we'll have more on that in just a minute. Next slide, the POB overall benefits. When we brought this to the board, what was really the objective? It was to eliminate the UAL at the time of issuance, so we'd get rid of that unpredictable debt with predictable debt payments going forward. It would show that we had savings each year over time, estimated savings, but with the footnote that while UALs are likely to accrue over time, the pension strategy at the time of your decision was fiscally sound and well-positioned for long-term savings. Next slide. And you'll see a couple more slides after this. The UAL contributions after the pension obligation bond in 23 and 24, 0 was required. Then in 24, 25, $469,000 was required. So it shows that by using the pension obligation bond, it was immediate reduction of the unfunded liability. Next slide. Let me see if those. Yeah. However, we did disclose back in February that there is risk to this. It's not, not without risk. So we, CalPERS assumed a 6.8% return when calculating the liabilities. Returns below 6.8% going forward would result in higher UALs, and returns above 6.8 would result in lower UALs. But then they also indicated that, well, if you have lower UALs, you may have surplus funds being generated at CalPERS. Well, yeah, that's a risk. You can't withdraw them, but then you just don't pay next year's costs. So it's not that big of a risk. And then another risk, it's shifted from actuarial assumptions to market performance. And the note at the bottom is future liabilities may grow due to inflation, rising salaries, demographic shifts, and actuarial adjustments made on a 2-year lag. It's hard to forecast on a 2-year lag, but that's how it's done. Next slide. And then factors influencing UAL changes, well, of course, the investment performance, but also district salaries or staffing increases. Remember, in some of their assumptions, they projected salary increases of 2.8%. Well, some of our labor contracts are higher than that for various reasons. But again, these are forecasts 2 years ago. And if they're different, that's going to increase UAL changes. And then also inflation assumptions have changed. They had a pretty low inflation number in there. And with inflation over the last 2 or 3 years, it made a significant difference in the unfunded liability costs. And here's the assumptions. They had a 2.3 long-term inflation rate, but it's been much higher in recent years. Elevated inflation drives the cost of living. These factors also increase employer contribution requirements because you have people retiring, but you have the COLA increases adjusted to them. And then you have the IRS limits on inflationary impacts. Next. We'll have some slides on this, so I'm going to skip through that. But the first bullet, but the second bullet, we should budget going forward, $1 to $2 to $4 million, depending on the budget year and funds, on an annual basis to minimize those future obligations and not have that negative amortization where you're not getting the money in on the returns, and so you're paying more and more in debt. And the next 2 slides will show some of that.
So Jim, I think the board action on that could be during the budget process, we make sure that we include that in our budget so we pay off those obligations as they occur.
Yeah, certainly I haven't had a chance to talk with Pravani. We've only had 15 minutes together. No. But one of the thoughts is when the budget is prepared, as Alan suggested, bring something back to the board saying, okay, here's where we are on the UALs, on the pension and OPEB, and how much do we want to allocate to those going forward. So you'll see that each year. But just for example, if you look at these, in the 23-24 projection, the top block there, it shows 0 UAL payments going forward. Well, we did the pension obligation bond. The next box down below is the next year, 24-25. Their forecast is 469, and it goes up to $1.1 million. again, because inflation changes and things like that. Next slide. And here's the 25-26 forecast going forward. UAL payment of 1.1 to all the way up to 1.8 million. So it tells you that inflation forecasts, salary forecasts are major contributors to it. Because if the average rate of return is, over 6%, those other factors drive it a lot harder. Next slide.
Yeah, I think the big thing will be to avoid digging ourselves into that hole again. So try to keep up on it. Yeah.
And do it at each budget cycle.
Yes.
So this is just preliminary response, questions, the use of our pension obligation bonds, primarily referencing the Government Finance Officers Association guidance. One of the issues was, what about the pension obligation bond versus the CalPERS interest rate? And you can see the savings there is, 2.3%. Net savings are going to continue to occur due to the CalPERS returns compared to our pension obligation bonds. They also suggested that we don't do any swaps or complex instruments. They weren't used in this pension obligation bond. And they were concerned about not preserving our senior lien bonding capacity. But ours was a subordinate debt service, which included a flexible call option in 10 years. So if the interest rates change, we can do a call and make a refinancing opportunity then. Next slide. So again, I just covered this, but again, it was a subordinate lien versus senior lien. They were concerned about our rating agencies changing our rating status. We just got reconfirmed at our AA rating scale, so that wasn't a concern. Mentioned about the callable within 10 years. And the debt service is structured to decline over time with an average life of 10.2 years. So overall, the structure of the pension obligation bond that was presented to you addressed all those issues. Next slide. So at the end of all this, I believe, and I think our financial advisors would concur to that, is the pension obligation strategy continues to generate savings and support our overall financial stability. I think we still need to monitor the CalPERS investment performance versus the investment trends and salary trends, bring that to the board in our budgeting cycle, and then really manage the pension funding with a long-term strategic outlook to fund more than the minimum UAL of 1 to 2 to 3 million, depending on the financial situation of the district.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Questions?
Yeah. Any board questions or comments?
Why wouldn't Ashley want to sit through that presentation?
I'll make a comment. I think that when we were doing this, we discussed it at length. And CalPERS, I think, has reasons and motivation to overestimate their rate of return and perhaps underestimate their liabilities. Otherwise, there are many, many, many organizations that would be impacted negatively, fire districts, other government organizations that participate in the CalPERS pool. And so this is just an example of what happens when they do that, that we end up incurring a significant liability. Since we liquidated that liability we changed that liability to a bond liability. But the fact is the bond liability has predictable interest rates. We can budget for it. We're not rolling the dice every year counting on CalPERS to fulfill their estimates. And the bottom line is, at least today, it shows that decision is a $10 million savings for our organization and our ratepayers. So right now, it looks like it was a good decision. As things change, that could change, but I think that we went into that decision with eyes wide open. We made the call. If somebody else can second guess us and say, oh, no, you didn't do that, but I think the board acted responsibly.
And you have the call provision included in there, which is important.
Any other board comments? Okay, yes, Director Anzini?
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you for bringing this forward, because I think it was really important for the public to understand how creative this was and beneficial on saving ratepayers money. In the long run, it may not be the best conclusion, but you're going out at least 10 years. And as someone who is a benefactor of PERS, you have to also look at the large amounts of money they have. They are one of the largest pensions providers in the country. And you're talking billions and billions of dollars. We have firefighters in it. They make great money. So therefore, they contribute a lot of money to that, and they expect that when they retire. They have a lower threshold. Compare it to Social Security, and you've got the same problem. Social Security gets a cap, PERS gets a cap, pension systems get capped, and then we are under budget and overachieving providing retirement funds to people who contributed. So it is a defined benefit, and as far as I can tell, all of this is defined benefits, and like as if Social Security as participants. So all people who consider this as a sham should not, because impact for retirement is important unless you raise the retirement age. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. I just encourage the board to remember during the budget cycle that we make sure that we include the liquidation of the current accumulated OPEBs, so we don't dig ourselves this hole again. Any other board comments? Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on information item number 10, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, there are no members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 10.
Thank you. I believe this concludes all of our agenda items for today. We are going to go into closed session. Do we have a time estimate for closed session?
Thank you, President Dwyer. I
I'm
anticipate.
asking you, but I'm,
Yeah. I anticipate that the closed session items, agendized as closed sessions A and B, will require at least 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay, thank you. Then we'll adjourn to move to closed session and not return sooner than about,
11:15.
thank you.